I'm now going to read the second part of chapter 2, The Coming of Others. It was the 10th night since the coming of the humans when the guardian awoke from sleep, gasping for air. He sat up trembling, feverish and cold. The bed sheets, bright in his Alassian night sight, were wet with sweat. A dreadful fear was in his heart, and he thought perhaps a dream had caused him distress. But thinking hard, he could not remember to have been dreaming. When at last his drowsiness dissipated, he remembered the humans. He fixed his gaze on the wall, where a knot in the wood drew a darker shade in the light blue tinge of his night vision. He silenced his mind and let his consciousness seep out of his body and into the world, outside his room, outside his home, to the south, a mile or so through the Iris, to the house where the humans had been lodged. There, he found the unmistakable sharpness of fear, despair, dread, heavy and suffocating grievance. The humans waited, awake in the night. What were they waiting for? He threw off the sheets and barged out of his room. The wooden floor felt warm beneath his bare feet. Cold night air snatched at his naked torso. He banged on his father's door, shouting, "Father, wake up! Wake up, father!" The door swung open. "What is it?" Father stood dressed in his day clothes, his ivory sheathed sword secured at his waist, his robe creased and his face showing signs of slumber. "The humans! They fear for their lives." Father made no reply. His mind was slow with sleep. "They are waiting, awake, all of them. I think..." He shone his gaze to the sky, and in the distance he saw an object, dark in the flow of the world's energies. His eyes could not glimpse the object per se, for it was too far, but he discerned its shadow in the force that propelled it forward, a force that gleamed bright as fire, leaving behind a vaporous wake that far and farther dissipated into darkness. "Something comes," he said. "I don't know what it is. It's falling toward us." Miriathel stepped onto the stairs from where he could look at the night sky. "Father, I think that's what the humans fear." "I see a falling star." "It's not a star." For an instant, an overwhelming fear gripped both their bodies. Then it was gone, suppressed by his father's will. "Come with me." They ran down the spiral staircase, stopping near the quiet pond at the garden's heart, where the sky was open and vast. "You must share the Guardian's power with me," said Father, "and with as many Alassians as you can. Those who are adept will know how to use it to defend themselves and others. I will do the same and give them my protection, but you must open the way for me." He looked at his father, confused. "What? There is no time. Do as I do." Through the Guardian's sight he watched as a thread of light stretched from his father's belly and reached out to him, white, unwavering, and pure. His father's light, the Keeper's light. Heat filled him from within as the power wholly surrounded his body, a blanket against the chill of the night. "Hurry, child!" He understood what was asked of him. Only he had to find a way to do it. He held the inner flow of his life force steady, as his father had done, and reached deep within himself for the essence of his being, the core of the Guardian's power. He began to pull it outward. At once he felt sick. His instincts screamed at him to stop, to let go, let the essence fall back where it belonged. He was hurting himself. Yet his father's gaze was upon him, strong with determination. He must do what was asked of him, because now, in this time of need, he was the Guardian. And that who stood in front of him, requesting his aid, did not do so at his father, but as the keeper of the world's light. He did not understand what danger was upon them, but that mattered not. He was called to fulfill his duty, and that he would do. In his mind, he envisioned the essence of his being take shape in a thread of red light. He willed it to spiral around the white strand that joined him with his father. Then his own ruby essence enveloped father's body, and through it the keeper's light pierced here and there like beams of moonlight. Father's eyes shone red. "Yes," he said, gazing at the sky. "Now follow my light." At once a myriad of white rays stretched from Father's luminous form and went in all directions, fast, far, and sure. They sought Alassians in the city, touching and surrounding them with light and with power. They went farther and farther, and the city began to awaken. He stared at his father in awe. Long had he known Father's power to be great, but never had he imagined such manifestation of mastery and intensity. Not only did Father wield the keeper's light with skill, but while they shared in each other's essence, he was able to look at the flow of the world through red shining eyes, and open his senses to all of Irieth. He heard, in his father's mind, the chorus of countless Alassians, and in his heart felt their distress. He understood now his own insignificance. What was the mere decade of his young life compared to his father's long centuries of wisdom and training? And yet the guardian's power had been entrusted to him and him alone. Akialla, the guardian who had preceded him, had chosen him among all people to protect the world at the keeper's side. This he would do even in his inferiority, in his childhood inadequacy. He would prove his worthiness. He would be the guardian. He would protect Irieth. He began to stretch his ruby essence in the wake of his father's light, but found he could not follow all threads by sight. There were too many and went too far. He shut his eyes and focused on the hearts and minds of the people, willing his essence to them with every fiber of his being. The guardian's power pierced him through 1,000 times, straining in all directions. He groaned and gasped, but kept at the task. One after another, he enveloped all Alassians in his radiance. Then the entire city was under his and his father's protection. "Ready yourself," said Father. He opened his eyes. The world thundered with a deafening blast. Almighty currents came crashing from east to west, brighter than the sun and blinding to the eyes of the living. Through the guardian's sight, he watched the flow of energies hasten by. He saw the earth dig underneath his feet, and the trunks of ancient trees shred like desiccated leaves. Splinters spewed into the air like water from hulking buckets. Rocks and boulders flew up in the sky and shattered one another like pottery. He pushed against the mighty forces, and in them split an opening where he and his father stood, bent against havoc. It took all his strength and concentration to do so, and to keep the tear in place around them. The debris of the physical world he moved aside. Some slipped through his guard. His father caught it. Some they both missed. It stabbed their flesh, digging deep and sharp. A scorching heat washed over everything. It burned everything. It hazed the sight. It set fire to their lungs. Limbs of it slipped past his will and brushed against his flesh, hollowing the fabric of his trousers. They did not burn him, for the keeper's shield was at work. In the midst of chaos, a new awareness awoke in him. While he fought the harmful energies, he learned of a Falin who was on the verge of losing his own battle. He saw through his own eyes what the Falin's eyes saw. And it was then as though he was in two places at once. Instinct guided him. Without hesitation, he subdued the Falin's life force, bound it to his own will, and used this to shape the world of chaos. He pushed against the currents. He caught the debris before it stabbed the living body. He protected the life. He sensed other frightened hearts, overwhelmed minds, and came to their aid, unbound and unyielding. Time stretched endlessly as he battled on. Then the thrusting force ceased. The heat vanished. Silence lay still. Fire rose from the earth with the violence of a storm. He let his essence withdraw. It snapped back and struck him with a blow to the stomach. He dropped on all fours, vomiting a mouthful of bile, coughing and gasping for air. When the fit passed, he fought to quell his panting and trembling. His body hurt as if it were scraped all over. His strength was spent. The light faded from his sight, and he saw scarlet blood stream down his arms. Thick drops dribbled from his face and chest, dousing the ground beneath. All he could sense now was pain. Great, overwhelming pain. He shut his eyes and concentrated on breathing, gathering his life force, shaping it into threads of vitality in his belly. Warily and with great effort, he sent them prodding into the far reaches of his body. His flesh prickled and heated with healing fever. The ringing in his ears eased, and he heard the sputtering and whooshing of fire. The bleeding stopped. Then he sat back on his heels. His father was kneeling a step away from him, covered in blood. His eyes closed in concentration and his breathing puffing with effort. He wanted to reach for him, helping heal, but he couldn't. His body wouldn't move. Around them were ash, cinder, and fire. Nothing stood where it had once existed. Their home was a deformed ring of blazing debris. There was no shape to it but for a hollow where they had withstood the forces of chaos. The soil was scorched black. There was no water left in the pond. There was no pond left in the earth. The sky above was dense with smoke. From a fiery pile of rubble came a movement and a growl. Tashira emerged with her fur matted with dirt and blood. He watched her stupidly as she plodded to Miriathel and licked his cheek once with her white tongue. She began cleaning her wounds. She licked her right front paw. With it she cleaned her muzzle and ears. She licked her belly thoroughly. Then she licked her left front paw. She went on licking and washing, and her fur slowly turned black. Suddenly her snout snapped toward the sky, and she snarled. There was a swooshing sound, like a flapping of vast wings. Black and sharp, through the smoke's haze, a powerful body took shape, 2 legs, thick and muscly, 4 hooked talons on each foot. It flew on bat-like wings, long, wide, and with scales like thorns. The neck was serpentine and rugged, the face like that of a snake or a crocodile. It had long spikes and horns bent back, thick membranes stretched between the spikes. It flew downward, writhing in the air a little, as an eel would in water. It was very near already. It landed atop the circle of burning detritus and crouched forward on its taloned wings. Even so shrunk, it loomed enormously. It turned its neck to one side and watched through a shadowed black eye. "Lentie?" came father's voice. Almost in reply, a dark figure leaped from the creature's back, light and agile, a cascade of long white hair dancing with it, waving behind a black robe and stroking the ground. A second figure followed, heavier, slower, less graceful. Both dashed forward. He had not moved, still sitting on his heels, puzzled by the apparition. Father's grip seized his arm and snatched him onto his feet and to the side. He heard the clanging of metal against metal and the sliding of blade against blade. He bumped against his father's back and tripped. Then the steely grip shoved him face first into a pile of waste and ash and lost him. He yelped as hot, dry dirt scorched him. He scuffled blindly out of it. Grains of dust burned his eyes and forced him to blink and squint and peer half blind at his father and the black-clothed stranger and the winged creature, and where had the second figure gone? He saw Tashira bite and tear at the ground beneath her. Father slipped and reeled backward. The stranger pressed after him. They paused, immobile, father almost kneeling, the stranger towering above him. It was a Falin. That much he could discern despite the burning tears blurring his vision. He was muttering something. His voice, sharp and rough, echoed in the vastness with a chanting, hypnotic rhythm that was ominous to hear. All else had fallen silent, as though the world awaited answer. In that stillness, Father spoke words of the ancient tongue. His voice rang loud and bright. "Nuikara, Paivon Nalanui, Onnihimmara." Tashira's roar crushed like ocean waves. She moved like wind, rushing past father and the stranger and bouncing to where he half sat on one foot, baffled and slow, unable to do anything but watch the fight take place around him. She bumped her snout against him, and he floundered forward, catching himself with unsteady hands on the ground. "Go with her!" shouted father. All he could do was blink back at him. "Radian, go with Tashira!" He turned his gaze to the Kara. She had bent her legs, her belly on the ground. He climbed onto her back and squeezed his thighs around her flanks. At once she sprung up. Fast and slick she climbed over the wall of burning rubble and wood, down the other side, away from the battle and into blazing desolation. She ran. Fire and smoke burned his eyes and filled his lungs with fitful coughing. Trees rushed by, broken, bent, turned to cinder on one side and to flame to the other. They crackled, snapped, came crashing down. Leaves of ash fell like hot snow in a blizzard. He put his arms up to shield his eyes and mouth. The wind howled hot in his ears. A sudden pain in his abdomen squeezed the breath out of him. The echo of a scream stabbed at his mind with the sharpness of a spear, wrenching his vision black. He bent over, pressing his face into Tashira's fur, clinging to her with one hand, and with the other clasping his belly, where a searing pain burned him from within. He panted, slobbering in the dark. Father's anguished cry wailed on, and on. He screamed along with it. "Stop," he thought. "Turn back, turn back." But Tashira kept on running. She kept on running. He kept on screaming, 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 until it all ended. He drew a lungful of smoke. He coughed it out. There was silence. In his mind, there was silence. Emptiness. In his heart, there was a hollow. Death. There was death. He was dead. Abandoned. He had abandoned him, left him to die. He was running away, not turning back. not doing anything, not knowing anything, not seeing where he was going. He was empty, full of cowardice. He was weak. He was nothing. He was dead. He was no longer aware of the passing of time. He did not notice the coming of rain. When Tashira staggered and collapsed, he made no effort to stop himself from falling along with her. She did not get up. He did not get up.